Good day to each and everyone, and for our learning objectives. At the end of the lessons, the students are expected to first identify what is Tolman's purposive behaviorism and Bandura's social learning theory. Second, differentiate the Tolman's purposive behaviorism and Bandura's social learning theory through the activities given. And next, show patience and interest in answering the given activity. So for our first activity, it is from Tolman's purposive behaviorism. So let's first solve maze A. So enter the left side and exit at the top. Makita ito ng mga arrow class. So in maze B, we first solve the maze A, then the maze B. Also, we will enter on the top and exit on the left side. So it is opposite from maze A, from maze B. So analysis. First, how did you solve maze A? What strategy did you use? Trial and error. Examine the maze before proceeding with your pen. Second question. What is easier to solve, maze B or maze A? Why? So in Tolman's purposive behaviorism, there are two theories reflecting neo-behaviorism that stand out. So these are Edward Tolman's purposive behaviorism and also Albert Bandura's social learning theory. So both theories are influenced by behaviorism. So it is focused on external elements in learning, but their principles seem also be reflective of the cognitive perspective that is focused in internal elements. So purposive behaviorism has also been referred to as sign learning theory. So, and is often as the link between behaviorism and cognitive theory. So Tolman's theory was founded, or its origin are Gestalt psychologist and John Watson, the behaviorist. So Tolman believed that learning is a cognitive process, and learning involves forming beliefs or obtaining knowledge through purposeful and goal-directed behavior. So in learning, it has a purpose, or it has a goal. So if you are learning, then you have a goal and you have a purpose. So Tolman stated in his sign theory that an organism learns by pursuing signs to a goal. So from signs, we follow signs, then it will turn into a goal. So learning is acquired through meaningful behavior. So Tolman's form of behaviorism stressed that relationships between stimuli rather than stimulus response. So when we say stimuli or stimulus response, for example, if you want to eat, when you are hungry, you need to eat, right? So that is a stimulus response. So Tolman said that a new stimulus or the sign becomes associated with already meaningful stimulus, the significate. So in your maze activity, the new stimulus or sign or the maze B became associated with already meaningful stimuli, the significate or the maze A. So next, Tolman's key concepts. Learning is always purposive and goal-directed. As what I've said, if you are learning, then you have a purpose or you are following a goal. Then Tolman held the notion that an organism acted or responded for some adaptive purpose. He believed individuals do more merely respond to stimuli. They act on beliefs, attitudes, changing conditions, and they strive toward goals. So an individual has a goal. So I don't think that an individual has no goals in life, because every individual or every people, every person has a goal that they want to achieve. So he saw behavior as holistic, purposive, and cognitive. So cognitive maps and rats. So in his famous experiment, one group of rats was placed at random starting locations in a maze, but the food was always in the same location. So there are a group of rats that started in random location, but the placement of the food was in the same place. So the group that had the food in the same location performed much better than the other group, supposedly demonstrating that they had learned the location rather than a specific sequence of turns. So Tolman figured out or found out that organisms will select the shortest or the easiest path to achieve a goal. So next, latent learning. It is a kind of learning that remains or stays with the individual until needed. So it is learning that is not outwardly manifested at once. According to Tolman, it can exist even without reinforcement or without some help. So he demonstrated this in his rat experiments wherein rats apparently learn the maze by forming cognitive maps of the maze, but manifested this knowledge of the maze only when they needed to. So the concept of intervening variable. Intervening variables are variables that are not readily seen but serve as determinants of behavior. Tolman believed that learning is mediated or is influenced by expectations, perceptions, representations, needs, and other internal or environmental variables. Next, reinforcement but not essential for learning. So Tolman concluded that reinforcement is not essential or helping is not essential for learning, although it provides an incentive for performance. So it gives a strategy. So reinforcement is just a strategy, but it is not really important to learning. So it is just a strategy for performance, for good performance. So in his studies, he observed that a rat was able to acquire knowledge of the way through a maze. Example, to develop a cognitive map even in the absence of reinforcement.
So good afternoon everyone. So I will first read the following news article of a 10-year-old boy in Texas hangs himself after watching Saddam execution. Police and family members said a 10-year-old boy who died by hanging himself from a bunk bed was apparently mimicking the execution of former Iraq leader Saddam Hussein. Sergio Pilico was found dead Sunday in his apartment bedroom in the Houston area city of Webster, said Webster Police Lieutenant Tom Clunch. Pilico's mother told police he had previously watched a news report on Saddam's death. It appears to be accidental, Clunch said. Our gut reaction is that he was experimenting. An autopsy of the fifth grader's body was pending. Julio Gustavo, Sergio's uncle, said the boy was a happy and curious child. He said Sergio had watched TV news with another uncle on Saturday and asked the uncle about Saddam's death. His uncle told him it was because Saddam was real bad, Gustavo said. He, referring to Sergio, said, okay, and that was it. Sergio's mother, Sara Pilico de Leon, was at work Sunday while Sergio and other children were under the care of an uncle, Gustavo said. One of the children found Sergio's body in his bedroom. Police said the boy had tied a slipknot around his neck while in a bunk bed. Police investigators learned that Sergio had been upset about not getting a Christmas gift from his father, but they don't believe the boy intentionally killed himself. Clinical psychologist Edward Bishop of California said children of Sergio's age mimic risky behaviors they see on TV, such as wrestling or extreme sports, without realizing the dangers. He said TV appeared to be the stimulant of serious case. I would think maybe this kid is trying something that he thinks fun to act out without having the emotional and psychological maturity to think the thing through before he acts on it, Bishop said. Family members held a memorial for the boy Wednesday in the apartment complex activity center. Gustavo said the family is trying to put together each money to send serious body to Guatemala for burial. I don't think he thought it was real, Gustavo said of Saddam's hanging. They showed him putting the noose around his neck and everything, so why show that on TV? So, let's proceed to Albert Bandura's social learning theory. Social learning theory focuses on the learning that occurs within a social context. It considers that people learn from one another, including such concepts as observational learning, imitation, and modeling. So like what happened to a 10-year-old boy, Sergio Pilico, after watching Saddam's execution on TV and then must have imitated it. So, dapat careful ta. Dapat atong guide ng atong ang mga bata. Labi na kung magtanaw bitaw sila TV. Kay kintahay makatanaw sila mga gira-gira. So, na posibilidad niya ila po tong tag-ingon nang papalit sila og kanang pusil-pusil diba? So so adults are the model of the children. So among others, Albert Bandura is considered the leading proponent of this theory. So here are the general principles of social learning theory. So number 1, people can learn by observing the behavior of others and the outcomes of those behaviors. So, kanang bata, bisan pag di ni mo natuluan, unsay buhaton, unsay ngana, basta maka-observe na siya na nga behavior, na ay posibilidad nga iya ng tag-ingon. So, tahay. Ang mama o bata, ang mama nag-makeup, so makatag-ing pud ang bata na. So learning, number 2, learning can occur without a change in behavior. Behaviorists say that learning has to be represented by a permanent change in behavior. In contrast, social learning theorists say that because people can learn through observation alone, their learning may not necessarily be shown in their performance. Learning may or may not result in a behavior change. So even if a child is exposed to a certain behavior, it doesn't necessarily mean he or she will have a change in behavior. So magdepende ra po na sa motivation kung imo ba nang kung mag-change ba yung behavior after ka ma-expose anang behavior. Kintahay na-expose ka sa tahay ang imong family kanang magsigi og away niya, dili to nimo siya, magdepende ra pud og imo pa to siyang manundog pa pud kanila, diba? So naragya po na nimo sa imong self kung makapakuan ba kag unsa may ma-benefits nimo kung imo tong i-imitate nga behavior, diba? So next, number 3, cognition plays a role in learning. Over the last 30 years, social learning theory has become increasingly cognitive in its interpretation of human learning. Awareness and expectations of future reinforcements or punishments can have a major effect on the behaviors that people exhibit. So, cognition, mga hibaw-an nimo, magamit ra gyapon nimo sa umaabot nga panahon. So, number 4, Social learning theory can be considered a bridge or a transition between behaviorist learning theories and cognitive learning theories. So, kaning social learning theory, behaviorist learning theory, and cognitive learning theories, connected na sila, sabing bridge. Na sila connection kaning tulo ka theory. So, kung social learning theory, muna kung maka-learn tag kung mo interact tag laing tao. Behaviorist kanang the way ta mo act. Then cognitive kanang more on kanang reading, critical thinking, ana bitaw. Hilig basa mga libro. So let's proceed to how the environment reinforces and punishes modeling. So people are often reinforced for modeling the behavior of others. Bandura suggested that the environment also reinforces modeling. This is in several ways. So number 1, the observer is reinforced by the model. So for example, a student who changes dress to fit with a certain group of students has a strong likelihood of being accepted and thus reinforced by that group. So, ang student ko iyang nag-change siya mga outfit niya. So, na-influensihan siya ana nga grupo. Like, sa example, another example is kanang pintahay unsay uso karon. Diba makakuan pod, ma-influensyahan pod ang mga or ang ma-influensyahan pod ang kana nga student. O diba ma-influensyahan sa hintahay ka ng mga K-pop na iban nga magpakuan pa ang buhok, magpabulaw nga na ba. So, number 2, the observer is reinforced by a third person. So the observer might be modeling the actions of someone else. For example, an outstanding class leader or student. So the teacher notices this and compliments and praises the observer for modeling such behavior, thus reinforcing that behavior. So, third person. So, number 3, the imitated behavior itself leads to reinforcing consequences. So, many behaviors that we learn from others produce satisfying or reinforcing results. So, pintahay, namatikdan nga na group of students nagsigi og kanang exercise. So, kadto, ma-imitate po nimo siya. Na ikaw, ganahan na po ka mo exercise every morning. Another example, dahil sa OFW, ninguli diri sa Pilipinas, then iyang na-adapt ang culture dito. So, naobserbahan itong OFW sa mga kailan niya, mura po makasundog po sila. So, naay imitation sa behavior. So, number 4, consequences of models' behavior affect the observer's behavior vicariously. This is known as vicarious reinforcement. This is where the model is reinforced for a response and then the observer shows an increase in that same response. So, Bandura illustrated this by having the students show a film of a model hitting the inflated doll. So, katong bubo doll. Nag-experiment ni Albert Bandura. Na, katong na group of students, duha ni siya ka group. Ang group A, the children were exposed to a violence. Pakita sila atong film. Expose sila itong violence din. Sa group B, wala sila nakita nga violence. So, pagkahuman nilang tanaw sa film, gitawag sila one by one Anya, katong naka-expose atong film katong gihit gipunch ang katong inflated doll. So mao pud to ilang gibuhat. So the children who were exposed to the violence did the same thing kung unsa ilang nakita. So sa group B, kay wala man sila nakakita atong gihit ang doll, gikuan. So pagtawag nila one by one, so wala sila gibuhat adto nga doll. So you can set a behavior to a certain audience. So let's proceed to contemporary social learning perspective of reinforcement and punishment. So number 1, contemporary theory proposes that both reinforcement and punishment have indirect effects on learning. Kung may tag reinforcement na sila duha. It can be either positive or negative. So number 2, reinforcement and punishment influence the extent to which an individual exhibits a behavior that has been learned. So, magdepende ra pud na sa gigamit sa maestra kung unsa paagi niya sa pag-reinforce o pag-punish sa kabata. So, both will influence their behavior. Number 3, the expectation of reinforcement. So, number 2, dahay, di ba sa una is hilig, pwede pa magamit og stick ang teacher. So, kato nga bata, so mahadlok na siya mosud sa klase. Di ba? Ito siya, maka-epekto po siya. So, number 3, pero karon dili na pwede magamit og stick. So, number 3, the expectation of reinforcement influences cognitive processes that promote learning. Therefore, attention plays critical role in learning. And attention is influenced by the expectation of reinforcement. So, kantahay, a teacher will tell to a group of students that what they study next is not on the test. So, dili mag-expect ang mga students. So, dili sila mag-pay og attention. So, that would be all.
Let's proceed to the cognitive factors in social learning. Social learning theory has cognitive factors as well as behaviorist factors. First, we have learning without performance. Bandura makes a distinction between learning through observation and the actual imitation of what has been learned. This is similar to Tolman's latent learning. So in this case, we do not know whether a child learns or not because he does not perform. For example, a child is shy towards his teacher when he is tasked to read in class. So in this situation, the teacher would assume that the child does not know how to read. But when the child gets home, the mother observed that the child can actually read. So this shows latent learning or learning without performance. He learns or he knows how to read, he just do not show or exhibit it towards others. Number 2, cognitive processing during learning. Social learning theorists contend that attention is a critical factor in learning. So, syempre, attention is really important in learning. Without attention, it is hard to understand or analyze what you are learning. Attention is a must in learning. Next, we have expectations. As a result of being reinforced, people form expectations about the consequences that future behaviors are likely to bring. They expect certain behaviors to bring reinforcements and others to bring punishments. So why is it a factor in social learning? Why is expectation a factor in social learning? It is because when a child knows why he does what he does, the more there, the more that there is learning. When expectation is set towards a child, he becomes aware of what he has to do and what is expected of him to do or to learn. Next, we have reciprocal causation. Bandura proposed that behavior can influence both the environment and the person. In fact, each of these three variables, which is the person, the behavior, and the environment, can have the influence of each other. So last, under the cognitive factors in social learning, we have modeling. There are different types of models. There is the live model, or an actual person demonstrating the behavior. There can also be a symbolic model, which can be a person or action portrayed in some other medium, such as TV, videotape, computer programs. So again, naatay different types of model, one of which is referred to as live model. This person or the live model is present physically. For example, your parents, your teacher, yan na. So whereas symbolic model is a person or character or action portrayed in medium, such as television, videotapes, etc. So now we'll proceed to the behaviors that can be learned through modeling. Many behaviors can be learned, at least partly, through modeling. Examples that can be cited are students can watch parents read, students can watch the demonstration of mathematics problems, or see someone act bravely in a fearful situation. So through observing or through learning from what they see, students could make use of models as a means of learning. Aggression can be learned through models. Research indicates that children become more aggressive when they observe aggressive or violent models. Another is moral thinking and moral behavior are influenced by observation and modeling. This includes moral judgments regarding right and wrong, which can in part develop through modeling. Conditions necessary for effective modeling to occur. So first we have attention, we have retention, we have motor reproduction and motivation. Let's start with attention. Bandura mentions 4 conditions that are necessary before an individual can successfully model the behavior of someone else. So one of the 4 conditions that Bandura has mentioned is attention. The person must first pay attention to the model. So it is important to pay attention towards the model in order to observe or properly observe the behavior. So second, we have retention. The observer must be able to remember the behavior that has been observed. So one way of increasing this, or one way of increasing retention or being able to recall is through using techniques of rehearsal. Next, we have motor reproduction. The third condition is the ability to replicate the behavior that the model has just demonstrated. This means that the observer has to be able to replicate the action, which could be a problem with a learner who is not ready developmentally to replicate the action. For example, little children have difficulty doing complex physical motion. And last, we have motivation. Learners must want to demonstrate what they have learned. This is the final and the most necessary ingredient for modeling to occur. So motivation is really important in order to successfully model a behavior. And remember that since these four conditions vary among individuals, different people will produce the same behavior differently. Now let's proceed to effects of modeling on behavior. First, we have modeling teaches new behaviors. Also, modeling influences the frequency of previously learned behaviors. Modeling may encourage previously forbidden behaviors. And last, modeling increases the frequency of similar behavior. For example, a student might see a friend excel in basketball and he tries to excel in football because he is not tall enough for basketball. Educational implications of social learning theory. First, students often learn a great deal simply by observing other people. So through observing, students could learn. Kanang bisan dili na ka magbuhat o mismo mo experience, but through observation or through the experiences of others that you see or you observe, you can still learn and you can still simply learn from it. Next, describing the consequences of behavior can effectively increase the appropriate behaviors and decreases inappropriate ones. This can involve discussing with learners about the rewards and consequences of various behaviors. Number 3, we have modeling provides an alternative to shaping teaching new behaviors. Instead of using shaping, which is operant conditioning, modeling can provide a faster, more efficient means for teaching new behavior. To promote effective modeling, a teacher must make sure that the four essential conditions exist. Again, the four essential conditions were attention, retention, motor reproduction, and motivation. Number 4, teachers and parents must model appropriate behaviors and take care that they do not model inappropriate behaviors. So, importante nga ang good behavior magsugod sa teacher o sa parents. Kay kung unsa man ang makita sa students sa mga much older o sa teachers sa mga ilang parents nga mauna ang ilahang behavior or batasan or ilahang kinaiya o may pamaagi, so murag mauna nay ma-introduce sa hunahuna sa bata. So importante nga always good and appropriate behavior jud ang ipakita. Number 5, teachers should expose students to a variety of other models. This technique is especially important to break down traditional stereotypes. So in this case, teachers should be flexible. So kinahanglan ang teacher mangita og daghan nga pamaagi aron makakaton ang students. So teachers need to explore in order to improve the teaching and the learning process. That ends our discussion and thank you for listening.